Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. Welcome to yet another webinar in the Citrix Study Technical webinar series, where we showcase how Citrix and our partners like Goliath Technologies have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions to common problems faced by our customers. I'm Anil Kumar, your host today, and I'm a part of the Citrix Ready technical marketing team, leading the network ecosystem. So today we have Goliath Technologies, who have been in the industry for a really long time and have developed solutions which really helps get to the bottom of what's going on in an IT environment and quickly isolate the problem. Today we'll see how IT heroes, with the help of Goliath Technologies, can proactively monitor, troubleshoot, and resolve end-user issues regardless of your location. And along with me today from Goliath Technologies, I have our main speaker, Todd George. Hey, Todd. Welcome to the Citrix Study Technical webinar series. Could you introduce a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, everybody. My position here with Goliath Technologies is Senior Client Implementation Engineer, and going to be taking you through the webinar today. So glad to be here.
All right. So before we move on, I just wanted to provide a bit of a background of what Citrix Study is. Citrix Study is an end-to-end technology partner program that showcases and recommends third-party products, solutions, and services that demonstrate compatibility with Citrix's products. But thus customers can quickly and easily find solutions that's recommended by us. All these products are published in Citrix Ready Marketplace, hosted at citrixready.citrix.com. And if you're interested to know more about our program, want to partner with us, or if you have a product to validate with us, please you can find more details in the Citrix Ready partner portal at the below link. So we are very proud to have Goliath Technologies here today, and without any further ado, let me hand it over to Todd. Just one housekeeping item to keep in mind. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the question panel available in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll try and take all of them at the end of the session. So Todd, welcome once again, and it's all yours.
Great, thanks again. So I'm just going to go through a quick agenda slide, kind of talk about what we're going to talk about. So a little bit of an introduction. We're going to give a real quick, brief introduction of Goliath Technologies for those of you who aren't familiar with us. Talk a little bit about our support for hybrid, multi-cloud, if you will, cloud and hosted infrastructures, AWS, Azure, for example. We're going to talk about some specific use cases of our technologies and some of the places where our customers have found great value in our products. Also going to talk through some specific troubleshooting examples, including demos of the product and technology that we have to offer here. I've also got a great sneak peek at our new release that's coming up at the end of the first quarter. We're very excited about this new release, and want to show off a couple of slides to everybody on the webinar today. Also, throughout the webinar here and at the end of the webinar, we're going to cover any questions and answers, or questions that may come in, and hopefully provide answers to those. So a little bit about Goliath. We are a software vendor that makes monitoring solutions for your hybrid infrastructure. So we cover physical devices, virtual devices, obviously, cloud, on-premise, off-premise, wherever the stuff lives. We have a lot of technologies let me rephrase that. We have a lot of parts of our technology that are geared toward multi-data center approaches and monitoring those infrastructures from one pane of glass, so that you don't have to log into multiple different monitoring products, everything comes back to one central console. We have the ability to dance around, different firewall issues that you may run into, and kind of have all of your monitoring from offsite data centers come back through essentially one port, make it very easy to manage and maintain that way. We also have deep integration into Citrix environments. We also have great integrations into VMware ESXi, vCenter approaches, Zen Server. So we kind of monitor the entire infrastructure from that single pane of glass. We also look at things like the NetScalers in your environment and can pull back very detailed metrics from those. With deep vision into the virtualized infrastructure in general. So a little bit about our troubleshooting philosophy. We like to throw around the marketing terms of anticipate, troubleshoot, resolve, and prevent. That's what we're all about. We really want to help you get to the bottom of issues that are happening in your environment, get out in front of those issues, and really be able to know about problems before it affects your end users. At the end of the day, having a Citrix environment is all about providing an application to an end user and making sure that the performance of that application is good enough that the end user doesn't really notice that it's not a local application. In our experience with end user experience issues in Citrix environments, we see that those issues occur at 3 key points. Logon initiation, so getting to a storefront server or getting to the login page. The login process itself, so delays associated with the logon. And then session performance. So once you're connected to the session and interacting with the session, delays associated with interacting in that session. So we're going to go through a couple of different examples here and talk through our technologies and how we've used them to troubleshoot some of the different scenarios that our clients have had. The first one is MTM Technologies. They are a very large service provider for enterprise and mid-sized corporations. And their infrastructure is Citrix Zen App and Zen Desktop, and they're running on top of Zen Server infrastructure. They also have a very extensive NetScaler deployment. And they came to us asking if we could help them prove to their customers that they were meeting SLAs, and also proactively get to the bottom of things like slowness, and they wanted to be able to kind of be a bit more proactive in notifying their customers that there were issues transpiring, if there were issues transpiring on their network. What we did for them was deploy the Application Availability Monitor and our Performance Monitor technologies to be able to get them the metrics they needed to provide back to the customers, and also to provide to themselves, to confirm that they were providing the service and everything was working the way it was expected to, and be able to kind of proactively manage that engagement with their customers. We also provided a lot of centralized dashboards and dashboarding capabilities to them. So I'm going to share out my lab environment. Bear with me one moment here while I switch that over. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a lab environment that's running our Goliath Application Availability Monitor technology. I'll give you a quick layout of the screen and kind of talk through some of the things that made this very important for MTM as they were providing those desktops to their clients. First off, the blue bars are indicating the logon duration, so how long it took to get logged into the environment. The orange bar is a trend line indicating the average availability of the environment. And you can see that my availability is a miserable 50%. That's done on purpose. This lab is designed to fail here and there so that we can show some interesting metrics. One thing to point out about all of Goliath's products, not only just the Application Availability Monitor, but our Performance Monitor technology as well, that we can dial back as long as you've chosen to keep that data around and get back to full details of that data. Nothing is ever rolled up or averaged out. So if you're in a troubleshooting engagement, you can absolutely get back to the detail that you need to get to. We also break down your load time of the different simulations that are running here in number of seconds, and show that also as a percentage of the overall load time. What I want to do is jump to the analysis page, which is kind of showing the same dashboard again, but now allowing us to break it down even further. So less in the dashboard side and more in the really getting to the deep troubleshooting and looking behind the scenes at what's going on here. The first thing I want to point out is that our technology is based around endpoints. So those endpoints themselves, when it comes to the Application Availability Monitor piece, they're logging into the environment on a regular basis, on a scheduled basis, and verifying and validating that your entire Citrix infrastructure is up and running, just as a real user would. And to that end, I'm actually going to show a quick video that shows exactly what's happening on those endpoints. So we're going to look here and see the automated endpoint opening up a storefront server, accepting any end user licensing agreements or disclaimer policies that may pop up, Logging into the environment as if they were an actual Active Directory user. These are actual Active Directory users. We would want them to be configured very similarly to your actual users in your environment. We're going to switch to the Apps tab automatically. Again, throughout this entire process, verifying and validating that there are no errors popping up, that there's nothing deviating from the way this process should go. Once we navigate to the Apps tab, we're going to verify that all the apps enumerate properly, that everything's up and running from that perspective. We're also going to look for specific apps, in this case, Acrobat Reader. We're launching Acrobat Reader in this simulation. We verify that Acrobat Reader popped up, there were no errors, no issues. As soon as that's proven to be fine, we minimize it and move on to the next simulation that we're running in this particular, from this particular endpoint, in this case, launching XenCenter. Once XenCenter launches, we minimize that, close out the applications, and log off of the storefront server. Once all that information happens, or all this processes happen, they're reported back to our technology and build the dashboards that we're looking at here. You can see the date and time of each of those simulations that were run, every app that was launched, the endpoint that it was launched from, session host that it connected to, if it connected properly, the availability of that particular session, so did it connect or did it not, and then which stage of the process did it fail, if it failed, and then an overall launch time indication on the right-hand side here. If we click into any of these, we can get full details of what was happening behind the scenes, including a screenshot of every step of the process. So we get a full detailed text-based log and a screenshot to show exactly what was going on at that endpoint during the process. We can zoom in on the screenshots too to get full detail. Part of the concept here is to get you as much info as possible so you have both sides of what's going on. Obviously, you're going to have access to the servers. You're going to see your infrastructure. Goliath Performance Monitor, which we'll talk about in a couple of seconds here, has full detailed metrics and pulls back a lot of information from the Citrix environment to make sure everything's up and running. But maybe the problem you're having wasn't something that your server environment's going to pick up. Is it, a local connectivity issue of some sort? Is it something wrong, on a storefront server based on a certain user account or user Active Directory group? Anyway, going all the way through to proving that that session launched properly and that we confirmed that we were able to see that session launch. If we look at a failure here, I'll look at a couple of different staged failures that we have. One of the staged failures is that we have a storefront server that's misconfigured, and you can see we get basically a page could not be displayed. Our technology flags that as a failure at the initial step of the process. Not only that, but I have another failure here that this user account doesn't have the proper permissions in Citrix. So you can see that we're looking for an Internet Explorer, and we're saying that's not found on the page, and you can clearly see that we don't have Internet Explorer available to this user. So all of that information is great, gets you really to the bottom of troubleshooting. If you get a particular branch office that calls in and says, hey, we're having problems accessing, you can drop to the endpoint that you may have installed at that branch office, take a look at things. Not only that, but if you have this running from Central, you can determine if it's an overall Citrix issue or if it's something more localized. Really nice features in this product are that this is a fully baked enterprise solution. This is not a collection of scripts. This is not a hacky approach to a combination of a bunch of different like screen scraping and screen pasting technologies. This is fully baked enterprise grade, and to that end, all of the management of the endpoints that are running the simulations is done directly from our interface. So you can select between Citrix and Microsoft Remote Desktop Services if you use any of that. You can actually do different URLs. So you can actually punch in your storefront URL here, use different Active Directory credentials for the different simulations, run them from different launch endpoints, launch different applications, set up the schedules, and so on. We also support advanced functionalities in Citrix, such as automatic desktop launches, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on. All of those are all baked into the product as well. Full ability to alert on issues whenever we detect an issue, whenever something isn't going the way you've defined, the way the timelines you've defined and such are configured. If something happens, we can email, we can text message, we can SNMP trap, we can also send syslog notifications. We can even run remediation scripts. So we have the ability to run executables, batch files, PowerShell scripts, and so on from the technology, wherever you'd like those to run in response to an issue that may have happened. So one of the other things that was important to MTM, so this was their ability to go through and determine that their environment was up and running. They built reports based on this through our technology that were able to give them that 100% effective SLA guarantee to their customers and say, look, from our testing, our servers were up and running. There may have been other issues with internet connectivity or whatever for outside customers, but we were able to determine that we were up and running from that perspective. Not only that, they were able to utilize some of our XenApp and XenDesktop session displays to really get some additional metrics and details to help their customers in troubleshooting efforts. So I'm going to jump back to our PowerPoint just for a moment here, so we can talk about our next use case. I'm going to skip some of this slide content's a little bit duplicated, so I'm going to skip the end user experience piece because we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So our next case study is Catholic Health Initiatives, which is a very large medical hospital facility across the facilities across the U.S. They had about 40,000 active users in their Meditech application. We also have a deep integration in EMR and EHR applications, so we support things like Allscripts. We support things like Epic, Meditech, obviously. We've got very deep integration into those EHR modules. In this case, they were a Meditech hospital. We have very deep rules built around the Meditech application itself, in addition to the Citrix environments that you publish those applications through. So they were having issues where they weren't able to get ahead of their Meditech EHR applications, and they deployed our application availability monitor. They had great success with it. You can see that they actually had prevented an outage that would have affected about 40,000 users. So what they actually were able to determine was the exact phase where the launch failed. And why that was important was this particular use case, this particular case study that they were sharing with us happened after a scheduled outage window where they were reconfiguring some things in the Citrix environment. Obviously, the administrative staff was testing things with their accounts. Everything looked great. They brought everything out of maintenance mode, went to basically end the maintenance window that they had scheduled, and immediately we were getting notifications from our Goliath application availability monitor indicating that there was a problem with logins. As they started to look into it, they were able to determine that the delivery group was misconfigured, and the administrative staff had the permissions to get in, but real users in the environment didn't, and that was after they made the changes they needed to make. So they're telling us that we potentially saved about 40,000 people from not being able to log in a healthcare scenario. That's obviously extremely important. So that was the Goliath application availability monitor also that we just looked at. I'm going to talk through a couple of specific troubleshooting scenarios here. First use case is when you see network performance causing disconnects. And instead of looking at the screenshots, I'm just going to jump right to our technology here. Bear with me one moment while I share that out again. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to our XenApp and XenDesktop session display. And this is one of the areas of our technology where you can get a real feel for what exactly is going on in the Citrix environment. We track deep metrics on all of the servers in the environment that we're deployed to. We have vision into underlying VMware infrastructures, Xen server infrastructures, and so on, full hypervisor integration. We're looking at the XenApp session hosts in the environment here. We're seeing the farming group name, XenApp server name, IP address, number of users connected, sessions they have open, and metrics such as XenApp server load, memory utilization, and CPU utilization. If we click on any of these, we'll actually get a detailed view. We call it our server snapshot metrics, showing the last 6 hours of performance on that machine and exactly what was going on from a CPU, memory, and disk perspective. So you can see we have indications of CPU, memory, and disk, showing CPU trend, including CPU ready. This is actually a combination of information. You can see we have the session host name here, but we also have the host name on the underlying hypervisor infrastructure. So these are metrics that are combined so we can see exactly what's going on, even down to the underlying disks and see how those disks were performing, latency, IOPS, and so on. We also have a full breakdown of the application performance, showing all the processes that are running on this particular session host. So we can really get to the bottom of what's happening with high CPU utilization and things like that. Not even just seeing the CPU utilization from the high level, but seeing it from the detailed view, showing which applications were causing it. If we move on to our published apps and desktop display, this is going to show a list of all of the sessions that are connected to the environment, including things like session state, user account name, IP address, client versions, Citrix receiver versions. If you guys are auditing Citrix receiver versions, we track all of that, fully reportable. All of this information can be alerted on. You can also not only set alerts in our technology, but send notifications out of the technology to other applications or to email. We also show log-on duration, ICA latency, and average ICA latencies for each of the connections. What I'm going to do, my lab has a little bit more interesting stuff under the virtual desktops, so I'm going to go into my virtual desktop side. I'm just going to define a little bit longer term search just to sort of some of the historical look back capabilities here. You can see all of the VDI sessions that have transpired across the environment. We can again sort all of these columns. We're showing the VDI machine name that we connected to, and we're actually able to go through and click on any of these. Now, I've actually isolated a session from earlier that actually had a lot of details I wanted to show. This one, you can see we have a pretty good indication of ICA latency here. Generally speaking, their session was pretty good. ICA round trip times are tracked as well. Full details on network latency, so showing that underlying network latency and what may have transpired, from a networking perspective to give us an idea of if that drove ICA latency we may be seeing or ICA round trip time. Most of the time, we all know that Citrix isn't the problem, it's actually something underlying. So your network problems, something like an outside internet provider, that last mile, so really getting as much detail as we can about that, including connection speed. And this connection speed metric is actually recorded and reported by the Citrix receiver, but we collect that from the server infrastructure. So we actually get the true details about what's going on with that connection speed, including any sort of tweaks you may have made to the network environment, like QoS or MPLS preferencing. Those will show through in this because it's not a test in a vacuum. It's not like an outside ping test. This is real traffic, real Citrix traffic, and we're garnering these metrics from that actual traffic. We also give a full breakdown of the inbound and outbound bandwidth that's utilized, which becomes really important when you're trying to troubleshoot if you have a connection speed issue, seeing how much data is trying to squeeze through the Citrix session. To get even more details about what's going on inbound and outbound bandwidth, we can actually break this down by ICA channel. So if we go to the ICA channel tab, it's going to show us the connection speed metrics, the ICA latency metrics again, so we have them in easy reference here. But now we're going to break down all of the sessions, all of the channels within the ICA session. So we're going to show inbound and outbound, bandwidth, obviously, but then we're going to show ThinWire, which is your Citrix video card. We're going to show clipboard bandwidth, audio bandwidth, additional things like printing bandwidth, scanning, USB traffic, whatever you may be doing across that Citrix connection, we break that down. Part of the goal here is to get, in a troubleshooting scenario, to get you as close as you can to determining what was happening with this session. So what was the user doing? Was it something that they were doing that was causing some of the performance issues they may have been having? And that might not be something intentional. It may have been, they didn't realize they shouldn't browse YouTube through their Citrix session, or they didn't realize that, a print job that they were printing printed as color and it was going to, spool to some enormous size as it transpired the network. So the real details about what's going on. Some of the use cases we've seen here are, when somebody comes in and they print, and that printer, we see a lot of print traffic, or in the case of YouTube, as I mentioned, where we see a spike and sustain of that ThinWire bandwidth. You can usually see some associated audio bandwidth along with it. So really get to the bottom of what's causing potential performance issues here. Additionally, we talk a little bit about application performance as well, so we can see exactly what's going on with those applications in your environment, what the user's got running, what's taking the most processing time, memory, I/O. We also break down the applications and show some details around window titles and things like that. We also get certain URL information from browsers they may have had open. So really, giving a chance to get really deep on the troubleshooting side of things. But that's been really important to us from a perspective of troubleshooting network connectivity, just from being able to look at the connection speed and network latencies that are reported in and see how that interacts with issues that a user may have been having. We'll jump back to our PowerPoint here for a moment. We also want to talk about resource consumption and how those issues affect your Citrix environment. So I'm going to jump back to our live demo instead of talking through the PowerPoint here. Bear with me one moment. All right. So I'm still in my session here that we were talking about earlier, and some things that become interesting. You can see that we've got a network latency. Let's call it anywhere between 20 to 40 milliseconds. Okay. We've got ICA latency that is pretty much average the same. Generally speaking, your ICA round trip time will be about twice that. So you'll see things like 40 or 80 milliseconds or something like that. But we have a couple of spikes here and there that are actually above that threshold, that aren't actually matched with anything in the ICA latency or network latency side. So we know that there's actually something happening in the back-end infrastructure that was causing that problem. And to get to the bottom of what's going on there, we can go to our server performance tab, and this brings up another server snapshot metric screen that looks very similar to the one we saw previously. However, there's some key differences here. First off, this timeline is isolated to the duration of the Citrix user's session. Additionally, we came in from a user perspective. So I was thinking about this user's name when I clicked on the session. I didn't really pay attention to what server or VDI they may have been connected to, session host or VDI. So we're seeing the VDI that they're connected to. And we're automatically combining that with metrics coming from our Zen server infrastructure that this all rides on. All of those metrics are combined here in the screen, and we can get to the bottom of any sort of end user experience issues that may have been caused by server performance. So you can see that we've got a couple of things that correlate with the timelines of what we were seeing there. Processor queue length and memory pages were actually right around the time that they were having those spikes. We also get full detailed information on the disk performance, showing IOPS and disk latency to see if those might be causing the problem, network performance metrics, and indications of our agent being up or down in the environment. So with that, I'm going to jump back to our PowerPoint. One moment. So we also want to talk through some of our other strengths in determining logon duration issues that you may have in your environment. So I'm going to jump back to our demo just to show that. Bear with me one moment. All right, so I skipped that tab as we were talking earlier, but we have a full breakdown of the logon duration. And this shows the full, we call it the 33 stages of the logon process. It's going to show you information about how long it took for the entire logon to occur, so 30 seconds in this case, how long it took to get to an interactive desktop, so 10 seconds less than that, or 9 seconds less than that, so 23 seconds to get to an interactive desktop. How long it took for each stage of the process, brokering, starting up VMs if you do that in your environment, client validation, server validation, establishing an HDX protocol, authenticating the user, processing group policies, processing logon scripts, and loading that user's profile. So breaking it all down to those overall stages to show you, to start to show you where that issue is or where your logon duration might be coming from. One thing to note as we go through this, anything that takes less than 1,000th of a second or anything that isn't done in your environment is automatically skipped. So then we're going to show even further detail on the Citrix delivery controller side of things and show you what's going on at the server layer. We're also going to show the Citrix receiver startup stages, showing you what's going on at the client layer. These acronyms are actually described when you hover over them. And we have a full document that covers the full details about what's happening behind the scenes for each of those stages of the process. Not only that, but we break down the entire logon. So we're going to show things like what delivery controller brokered the session or ZDC. We're going to show the Active Directory domain controller that was responsible for authenticating that user. We're going to break it all down and show full details behind the different group policies that we're processing and so on. Actually, there's a screenshot from a customer environment that shows a couple more group policies, so bear with me one second. My lab doesn't have a lot of group policies going on. So here's a detailed screenshot of a particular environment where we were troubleshooting with a customer, and you can see they had almost 6-minute logon times, so very long duration for login. We saw that a lot of it was the profile load, 322 seconds. So we started going down to the breakdown of the logon launch, and immediately we saw that they had some registry extensions that were processing through a group policy that were taking about 2 minutes. The one thing that stood out to us immediately as we were looking at this were how many different users that were affected had the exact same or nearly the exact same time under that duration. So we immediately started thinking about timeouts. And as we were working with the administrative staff and we mentioned the timeouts to them, they said, you know what, we did just decommission a bunch of servers. And they realized that their Citrix 7.6 drive mapping policy still had references to those servers that was causing the timeouts. So that was an easy fix. The harder fix came that was only 2 minutes of the problem. So there were 4 minutes that we were still missing. As we started to break down even further, we realized that they had a loopback policy that was being processed in their environment that was misconfigured and was kind of running out of control and was also causing additional timeouts. So we were able to work with them to get that resolved as well. So very clear results from this logon simulator, or I'm sorry, logon duration screen. So jump back to our PowerPoint real quick. Bear with me. All right, and one of the other things I wanted to do was show a sneak peek of our new UI that we're coming out with in the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter. And what we're doing here is the concept is to get even closer or even better at getting to the root cause of the problems that are happening in your environment. So we're putting a lot of the tech that we have and combining screens and making them much easier to navigate. And for example, our XenApp and XenDesktop session display, you now have CPU trends, memory trends, round trip time, bandwidth, all right here. Trend lines indicating the overall performance of those particular sessions broken down by user. So you can see exactly what's going on for each user. You can come right in here and say, you know what, that user's running slow because he's got 100% CPU, or memory's running really low, or his round trip time's really high. And you immediately have some indications of what's going on. Not only that, but we have full remediation actions through our monitoring rules, all of the intelligence that's baked into the product. You can remediate on any of those rules. However, we also now allow you to manually trigger those remediation actions. So if you want to log off a user session, you want to do other tasks relating to that user specifically. We also are bundling everything together into what we call our user experience summary. So this screen is also going to be on that XenApp and XenDesktop session display, and it's going to show you how everything happened. So what servers and what network devices were involved in logging that user in. Show a logon summary, so how long it took for that user to get established in the session, to get their session established, and exactly which stage of the process took the longest. Not only that, but we're going to bring all the key performance metrics to the front screen. So you're going to see things like ICA round trip time, CPU, memory, storage latencies. And you'll also notice the little flags here indicating where there were alerts or events that were triggered across the environment. So you get immediate and actionable data when you're working with a client or an end user. We're also going to talk about ICA, or we're also going to bring ICA's channel bandwidth directly to the front screen, showing you the full breakdown of what's happening in that user session, and give you a quick indication of the different applications by resource utilization. We're also going to polish up the logon screen quite a bit. You remember that had a lot of numbers on it. It's still got the numbers, the data's still there, but now we're going to show it in a graph trend as well. So we're going to show the different stages of the process and how long they took in a waterfall or a Gantt chart, whichever you prefer. And also we're going to talk about, we're going to clean up our ICA HDX connection tabs and kind of bring those in to look like the rest of the technology. These, the graphs are all still the same. We have a lot of the same info here. And again, you'll notice that we have the remediation action or the select action indications on each of these screens. So it's going to allow us to do things, like reboot a server or whatever else we may want to do. We also are showing the underlying VDA session host performance. So the actual session itself, session host, getting full details on those, including bringing alert trends, showing all of the different alerts that may have triggered on that device right to the front screen, showing alerts by categorization, showing the uptime of the box, just to see if reboot schedules might not be working right or whatever. We're also going to get down to the underlying hypervisor layer and have that host performance kind of also showing here, just kind of, again, changing the way the screen looks a little bit, making it more actionable, a little bit more details here. And then, most importantly, possibly the application performance section. So we're doing a lot of touch-ups here, showing CPU trend lines and memory trend lines for each individual process or application that's running within the Citrix user session. Also, the remediation actions are going to be very deep here. You'll be able to cap resource utilization. You'll be able to bring processes offline. So take a process out, kill a process, bring a process back up. Things like that will all be right from this interface, showing it both from a process perspective, so showing the executable files, and also from the applications based on their title bars. And we're also bringing all of our alerts, logging, and everything into one view. So the users themselves, as you're looking through a user session, you can see everything that relates to this user session. All of the underlying event logs that may be triggering, all of the alerts our technology is capturing, all of the various monitoring rules and stuff that are bringing alerts to the forefront here, and making it very easy to get to all this information right from one screen. So I think I think that is basically the end of what I was going to talk about here. Did we have any questions come in?
Yes, Todd. Thanks very much for the presentation. I think it went really well, and a lot of very useful information for our attendees today. And yes, let's move on to the question and answers. There's one question from the attendee. If you can shadow and use a session from the Goliath console, is that possible?
That's actually going to be part of the UI refresh. It's something that we've discussed. I don't exactly know what product management's current plan is there, but I believe that is something that is going to be one of those action items. I don't have a detailed list of the action items, unfortunately, but well, I do understand that that's something we are talking about having.
Great. So one of the so while you were explaining about the dashboard and all the different things which Goliath can monitor, one of the questions which is coming is how quickly can the Goliath console generate alerts?
So those alerts are near real time. Usually the alerts are within seconds of the actual event happening. Some of our monitoring, some of the underlying process monitoring and pieces like that, especially from like a perfmon counter perspective, some of those have a little more of a delay. Some of them are in like a 2-minute range, but it really depends on the scenario of exactly what metric we're looking at.
Great, sounds good, Todd. So I'm just browsing through the question panel. So you, I think this is related to one of the case studies which you mentioned. So the question is, have you ever been able to prove that a user's internet connection was the root cause of the session slowness?
Yes, absolutely. As we go through and look at the some of the different screens showing the connection speed, I can actually go back to that screen just to add a little color to it. But yeah, as we can prove the connection speed is an issue in certain environments, we've had plenty of environments. Actually, have a screenshot I think that'll reference this pretty well. Bear with me one moment.
Mm-hmm.
So this was actually, believe it or not, this was one of my sessions I had in our environment, and I was actually moving between different sections of the office. And as I walked between two of the conference rooms, I actually my wireless connection dropped, and I had the resulting spike in latency. So very clear indication that there was something wrong with my connection that was causing the problem. Additionally, I had actually streamed a bunch of video to show what that looks like when the video updates spike, but that was prior to my connection dropping there. But we've seen very similar things with in environments where, as we go through and look at sessions, we notice that all of the users from a particular location are experiencing extremely low bandwidth, as reported by the connection speed metric here. And that becomes very clear that there's an internet connection problem. Additionally, we see similar correlations where we're working with clients and we find that a bunch of users have the exact same network latencies. And network latency can be very indicative of underlying packet loss and things like that.
All right, excellent. I think the graphic on the screen clearly shows why the latency is happening. So another question is again related to the dashboard. If is it possible to view the version of the Citrix client installed on the endpoints?
Yeah, absolutely. We show that from quite a few different perspectives. One of the places that we didn't really talk about much today is our dashboard, our topology view, which automatically scales to any size environment, and really gives a lot of details about what's going on, kind of an overall perspective of your environment. But one of the places that it was actually driven by customer feedback is we show receiver version mix across the environment right here. So very quick, very easy, and at a glance can show you exactly what's going on with your receiver versions. Not only that, but we have full reporting capability to pull back receiver versions, and we show it from an ad hoc perspective. So if you want to go in and just take a look at I'm going to go in here and do a search of published apps and desktops, you can see that we have the receiver versions indicated here. All of these screens, if you go back and search over time, I'm just going to bring back some more data to make this a little fuller of a screen. If we go back and search over time, that Citrix receiver version is tracked for everything. And if we're doing this from a reporting perspective, obviously this can just bundle up and email to you on a scheduled basis. But from an actual like interacting with it and looking at it, from an admin perspective, you can also just hit the export button down here and get a full list, including all the versions. That version number is tied back directly to the user and the client name that they logged in from, so you know exactly where that receiver was potentially old.
All right, very, very helpful, Todd. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So there's a compliment from one of the attendees today. I think they were able to use Goliath reports to show to one of their end users that it was a problem with the wireless connection that they were complaining about.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we run into that a lot, actually. We've seen quite a few scenarios where, we see like a cluster of users, and I say cluster of users meaning their geographic location in the office, for example, that all have very similar latencies, and we can very quickly determine, working with admin staff, obviously, that there is, an access. We've run into access point configuration issues. We've run into bad access points dealing with clients. So yeah, that's been something that's happened quite a few times for us.
All right. So it's very interesting it's a very interesting product, and most of our viewers would like to know what exactly does it take to implement your product in their environment.
So it's actually a really easy implementation process. We have basically a Goliath server that's stood up in the environment. Our Goliath Application Availability Monitor and Goliath Performance Monitor technologies are both baked into the same product. They just happen to be separate tabs within the same underlying product. And those two products can be stood up within the space of about an hour or two. It depends on the configuration of the environment. But yeah, it's one machine. During demos, we'll install a SQL Express on that machine along with our product. It's all fully baked in, and we stand the database up and everything, just as kind of automatic. In production scenarios, we generally recommend having a separate SQL server. That separate SQL server can be shared, but it's mostly just because of the limitations of SQL Express from a data size perspective. So we want to be able to make sure that in production environments, we're not going to be able to hit, database limits and things like that. Also, one thing to note, the Q&A that's on the screen, I'm actually going to paste that into the chat window. That'll make the links a little bit easier to click, just so everybody has access to that. I know you can't click through on the PowerPoint.
Right. Right, makes sense, Todd. So that's from the server's perspective, and to configure or add all the elements of your data center to the Goliath. So what does it take from the end user's perspective, or the endpoints? Are we installing any kind of agents?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different integration perspectives depending on what we're looking at in the environment. From the Citrix perspective, end user experience metrics, there is an agent, we call it our intelligent lightweight agent. It's a very lightweight product. It takes about 0.1% of a CPU core, sits in memory between 20 and 60 megabytes depending on the deployment scenario, and sits on disk at around 6 or 7 megabytes. So it's a very lightweight, very small product, purpose-built in C++ for what we're doing with it here. Citrix metrics are collected by that product based on implementation in the Citrix Zen, your Zen app and Zen desktop session hosts, and your VDI infrastructure. We also install on some of the role servers in the environment to collect some of the metrics that we gather. The hypervisor integration is actually done at the API layer for Zen Server and for VMware. So there is no agent associated with that.
Great. And some very specific questions about the healthcare. So apart from Citrix, does Goliath also help monitoring EMR apps?
Yes, we have very deep integration into EMR and EHR applications. We're even in some of the data centers that host those products. So if you're one of their hosted clients, we can still help you. Some of the main products that we get a lot of detail back from Meditech. We get a lot of detail back from Allscripts. We even have dashboards that we can customize. We have modules that we can import to monitor those specific EMR and EHR applications. So the answer to that is very much yes. Healthcare is a key vertical for us.
Sounds good, Todd. So Todd, in terms of the reporting, are there any kind of retention limits on the data which is collected on the Goliath software?
There is no imposed limit. By default, there are a couple of limits that are just configured. But when it comes to the technology itself, we leave it up to the client how long they want to keep that data around. We have some clients who keep data for years. And those reports can be fully run at any time. There are something like 70 reports that are baked into the product out of the box. They are customizable and configurable. And as part of the UI refresh, I think it's this second stage of the UI refresh, we're actually even redoing our reporting engine to get even deeper information.
Great. So one more question related to Citrix end user session. So would the admins be able to terminate sessions from the dashboard itself?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I think our connection broke up for a moment.
No problem. So one of the questions is if it is possible to terminate a Citrix session from the Goliath's dashboard itself.
Yeah, that's part of our UI update. That is definitely one of the features we're baking into the UI update. Absolutely, that's going to show up under the actions or remediation buttons, or the sprockets next to the username. There's going to be an action sprocket that'll allow you to do that, and that again is scheduled for the end of first quarter.
Great. And with the shift to the cloud, so how does Goliath help monitor all these hybrid cloud environments, and also is Goliath available as a part of cloud service?
Yes, so we fully support cloud implementations. The technology itself, we have a couple of things that are purpose-built to make implementations in cloud scenarios easier. You can host it in most of the cloud providers that are out there without a problem at all. We've got plenty of clients that do that. We've even assisted with the implementation on quite a few of those scenarios as well. So the product is fully supported from that perspective. Yeah, we have full deep vision into, we have monitoring rules that are built for AWS and Azure environments, and there's nothing stopping people from customizing those or building additional rules for things they want to look at in those environments as well. One of the things that we know is we fully understand that there's a real difference in monitoring those environments compared to monitoring your on-prem infrastructure. There's limits on-prem that are different from the limits that you're going to see in a data center or cloud environment, and you want to make sure that those those limits in a cloud environment, for example, can cost a lot of money. So you want to make sure that you're monitoring from kind of a different perspective, a little bit of a different mindset. And we definitely have some rules built into the product that kind of have that mindset, kind of taking that mindset into account.
Great. So one more question coming in. So the question is, can you tell me how would I drill to performance data for a specific endpoint? And is that all held at the server level? I think this was part of the demo which you showed, but I think if you could rephrase.
Yeah, so we actually, from the endpoint perspective, you can install our agent on endpoints. We don't require it to be there. Just so we're clear, you don't have to do that if you don't want to, but you can install the agent on the endpoint and get full deep metrics on the endpoint itself. Most of the information that we collect is actually brought back to the server infrastructure from interaction with Citrix Receiver from the server side. So all of the information that we collected in the demo that we saw today was actually being pulled from the server perspective, and there wasn't a need for agents deployed to the client. Again, all of our interaction from that perspective happens through the Citrix Receiver, but not to say that you couldn't monitor endpoints if you didn't want to. And all of the data that we have is actually stored on the Goliath Performance Monitor server. So that's under your control. We don't bring any of that back to any sort of like hosted solution in our environment or anything like that. It's all under your control. If I didn't answer your question and need clarity, feel free to let me know.
Definitely. So one more very specific question again related to healthcare. So can Goliath monitor Cerner applications?
Yeah, we have again, a lot of familiarity with Cerner. We're actually in the Cerner data center, so we can actually, if you're a hosted client of theirs, you can actually have our agent run in the Cerner infrastructure. So yes, we're deeply integrated with them. We have dashboards specific to their product. We have modules that we can install that customize our view of metrics that are critical to Cerner environments. And obviously, because Cerner is usually delivered through Citrix, our deep Citrix integration also gives you a lot of vision into what's happening from that perspective.
All right, and Todd, does it matter which version of XenApp or XenDesktop or NetScaler is in the environment?
No, we actually support. We do. The technologies, the Citrix technologies, track different information based on their version, and as the versions have gotten, the later versions are actually tracking a lot more data. So we're actually able to get a lot more data from our infrastructure, from our technology. But we do support all the way back to Citrix 4.5. So if you've got some legacy environments out there, we can absolutely help out. Again, some of the metrics may be a little bit less, but we still track those as best we're able to. We also, from a Windows perspective, support quite old versions of Windows as well.
Great. Sounds good, Todd. And I think I'm just browsing through the questions window here to see if we've missed anything. And actually, there's a compliment for you that there was one of the attendees who was disappointed to not have Raja today, but it seems like you've done a stellar job, and I completely agree with it.
Well, thank you for that. Raja's missed when he's not here.
All right. So if there's, I think there are some very specific questions related to the costs and things like that. I think we could take that offline.
Yeah, that's probably best. Yeah, because right. I'm not the guy to answer that. So those are account people.
Great. Right. So and I see a couple of attendees asking if the webinar is being recorded and if the slides would be shared. To answer that question, yes, we'll be sharing the recording with all the attendees and registrants for this webinar. And with that said, Todd, once again, thank you very much for this excellent webinar. And any final thoughts from your end?
Yeah, only one thing. If you guys do want to get some, interaction from a quoting perspective, or even just talk to us for any other reason, you can actually hit us up at that techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com, or the phone number on the screen there. It's in numbers on the screen, but it's just 855-GOLIATH if that's easier to remember. And I did see one link that somebody was having trouble with one of the URLs. If you are having trouble with that, feel free to shoot us an email and we'll get you the right URL rather than delaying the webinar here.
Right. So we'll also ensure that with the follow-up emails which we send out with the recording, we'll also include all these links to get in touch with Goliath and also with Citrix Ready.
Great. All right.
Right. So with that said, we are just about to end today's webinar. Just wanted to take a moment and thank Todd once again for this fantastic presentation and great sharing great insights with us.
Yeah,
and
great.
Last but not
really appreciate it. Sorry to cut you off there. I just wanted to thank you as well for running everything, Anil. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Todd. Thank you. And last but not the least, I want to thank everyone who were able to attend today's webinar in the Citrix Ready Technical Webinar Series. And this shall conclude our broadcast. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.